You're listening to WBGU-FM 88.1 and HD1, Bowling Green, Ohio.
WBGU-FM is sponsored by Aardvark Screen Printing and Embroidery. Whether it's a business card holder for your desk, holiday gifts for employees, or promotional materials, Aardvark offers a wide variety of custom-made products for your business needs. Aardvark Screen Printing and Embroidery, a veteran-owned family business located at 123 South Main Street, Bowling Green, Ohio, and always open at aardvarkspe.com.
All right, hello, and good afternoon. It's 4:01. Oh, it just changed. 4:01 p.m. on the dot. On this Sunday afternoon, Sunday, July 29th. So we're nearing the end of July, and this is MICK'S, a Sherlock Summer edition. This is the show where I play about 3 full-length Sherlock Holmes old-time radio theater adventures, and then a couple little special old-time radio clip things at the end. If you've listened before, you know what this is about. If this is your first time listening, this is my last time doing this. This is my last show of a Sherlock Summer. And I don't think anyone will continue to do it after I'm gone. I think that this is a pretty one and done type thing. But anyway, yes, this will be the last episode of this, unless the schedule is pretty free over the summer. So unless I have the yearning to do a pop-up Sherlock show sometime this week, maybe, but maybe not. So what we're going to do tonight, I have a kind of theme for the 3 adventures that we're going to be listening to. And the theme is animals. And so I chose adventures with with any kind of animal in the title. So we have the Notorious Canary Trainer, The Case of the Hungry Cat, and The Affair of the Politician, The Lighthouse, and The Trained Cormorant. And that last one always stuck with me just because I didn't know what a cormorant was. Is it Cormorant or Cormorant? No, it's Cormorant, yeah. Its official name is Phalacrocoracidae, and it's a family of approximately 40 species of aquatic birds known as cormorants. Well, there you go. But that's not what we're going to listen to first. We're going to listen to the Notorious Canary Trainer, and this was from 1945. It first aired on April 23rd, 1945. And the voice actors for this one are Basil Rathbone and Nigel Bruce. So, enjoy this adventure about a canary trainer here on A Sherlock Summer on WBGU FM.
This episode from the life of Sherlock Holmes will be transmitted to our men and women overseas by shortwave and through the worldwide facilities of the Armed Forces Radio Service. Petri Wine brings you Basil Rathbone and Nigel Bruce in the new adventures of Sherlock Holmes. The Petri family, the family that took time to bring you good wine, invite you to listen to Dr. Watson tell us about another exciting adventure he shared with his old friend, that master detective, Sherlock Holmes. Say, and I've got a little something to tell you myself. I want to tell you that if you haven't sent in for your free recipe calendar, I think we've still got enough on hand to take care of you if you hurry. The requests have been pouring in like mad, literally by the thousands. No wonder. It's really a terrific offer. It's a calendar for 1945 and 46. It's in full color, and it tells you all you have to know about cooking with Petri wine. Write to Petri Wine, Petri, Petri Wine, San Francisco 26, California. San Francisco 26, California. But better hurry so we can get your recipe calendar to you immediately. And now let's drop in on our good friend, Dr. Watson. Good evening, Doctor.
Good evening, Mr. Foreman.
Where are the puppies tonight?
Well, I found them playing with a dead seagull, so they've been sent up to bed in disgrace.
You certainly look comfortable yourself, Doctor. What's that small blue book you're reading, the latest bestseller?
No, indeed not. This book was never a bestseller, my boy. It's entitled Practical Handbook of Bee Culture, with some observations on the segregation of the queen.
Quite a catchy title. Who's the author?
fellow by the name of Sherlock Holmes. He was engaged in writing it when the adventure I'm going to tell you about took place.
Well, you told us last week, Doctor, that a pair of canaries played an important part in the story.
That's quite right, Mr. Foreman. It was in the summer of 1908, I remember, and I'd persuaded Holmes to leave his Sussex bee farm for a few weeks and to join me in a holiday at the little fishing village of Kingsgate in Kent. We were staying at a charming little inn called the Fisherman's Arms, and for the first few days, our holiday was a delightful one. And then,
I suppose, Doctor, strange things began to happen.
They did indeed, Mr. Foreman, they did indeed. Very strange things. One afternoon, we just finished a late tea, I remember, and were sitting outside on the lawn sunning ourselves and enjoying our pipes. Holmes lay back with his long, thin fingers clasped behind his head, gazing thoughtfully at the multicolored fishing boat bobbing at anchor in the harbor. After a moment or two, he spoke to me.
Watson, you're really a splendid companion. I can't think of anyone else who would let me smoke my pipe in silence for half an hour without asking me what I'm thinking about.
That's not very surprising, Holmes, after all the years that we've been together.
Well, nevertheless, the gift is a rare one, old chap, and I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you, old fellow. By the way, since the half hour's up, what have you been thinking about?
The lack of enterprise of a modern criminal. Audacity and romance seem to have passed forever from the criminal world. Read this note I received this morning, old fellow. See for yourself how low I have sunk.
Oh, let's have a look. Mr. Holmes, I am staying in the same inn as yourself, and as I have had a very frightening experience this week, I thought perhaps you would help me. Please do. It's signed Mary Victor.
An exciting document, isn't it? Written on lavender notepaper, reeking of perfume, and the handwriting is obviously that of an adolescent girl.
You haven't bothered to answer, of course.
Oh, yes, I have. I sent a message back by our good landlord that I would be glad to see her.
Why, Holmes? You came down here to complete your handbook on bee farming.
Oh. Confound it. Those two wretched canaries are getting their sunbath on the windowsill above us.
Oh, I think it's rather jolly to hear little fellows chirping away up there.
Well, I find the sound most distracting. Let's go inside.
You know, Holmes, those birds are owned by a charming couple, Mr. and Mrs. Wainwright. I was chatting with them on the stairs this morning.
I'm afraid their charm will escape me as long as their pets continue to tweet in that irritating manner. You've spoken of the peace and quiet of the country inn, Watson, and yet I find that... Come in. Ah, Miss Mary Victor, I presume.
Yes, Mr. Holmes.
Please come in and close the door, won't you? Thank you. This is my old friend, Dr. Watson. You may speak quite freely in front of him.
How do you do, Miss Victor?
How do you do, Doctor?
Now, sit down, young lady, and tell me what's troubling you.
Mr. Holmes, I came down here from London to get away from someone, but I've been followed. I've been afraid to leave the inn. Until last night, I felt I couldn't stand being cooped up any longer. So I went for a walk on the seashore. Someone followed me, Mr. Holmes. I ran back here as fast as I could, but now he knows where I live, and I'm frightened. Please help me.
My dear Miss Victor, I'm afraid you must be much more specific before I can help you. Who has followed you down here, and why are you afraid of him?
I'll tell you the whole story. It'll sound strange to you, but I swear it. Oh, there he is again, down by the gate. I'm going to my room.
Now. Don't you be frightened, Miss Victor. I'm sure we'll be... Oh, that's all. Extraordinary thing.
I don't see anyone outside who might have frightened her. There are 2 or 3 fishermen loitering about. Wait a minute. Here's a young fellow walking up the path. Come on, Watson. Out through the French windows again.
Oh, good gracious me. Here we go again.
I think we'll take the liberty of accosting him. Excuse me, sir.
Yes?
Are you looking for Miss Mary Victor?
Is she young and pretty?
Yes, sir. She is. Extremely so.
Then I'm looking for her. Where can I find her?
I can see you're being facetious, sir.
Well, there's no harm in that, is there? By the way, who are you gentlemen, may I ask?
My name is Holmes, and this is my friend, Dr. Watson.
I'm Basil Carter. You're not Sherlock Holmes, are you?
That is my name.
I thought you seemed familiar. I know your brother, Mycroft.
Oh, indeed. Then I presume you're connected with the Foreign Office.
Yes, I'm in the consular service.
Are you staying at the inn, young man?
For a few days. It's funny that I should run into the great Sherlock Holmes.
Why, may I ask?
I was planning a murder.
Oh, really?
But with you
Murder?
gentlemen here, I see that I shall have to be very discreet.
Who is your intended victim, may I inquire?
There are 2 of them. The 2 canaries in the room next to mine.
Mary. For a moment, I thought that you were really serious.
But I am serious. The wretched creatures are driving me mad.
Yes, I quite sympathize with you, sir. I've been thinking of committing a slight case of mayhem on them myself.
We can take one apiece, Mr. Holmes. Well, I'm glad to have met you both. I'll probably see you again.
Goodbye.
Goodbye, sir, goodbye. I don't like that fellow, Holmes. If you ask me, he's the man who's been frightening the poor girl that came to us. He had a peculiar look on his face when you asked me he was looking for Mary Victor.
Well, there's only one person who can settle the question, and that's the young lady herself. Come on, old fellow. Let's go back indoors.
Shh. Here comes Wainwright, the owner of the Canaries. Good evening, Mr. Wainwright.
Good evening, gentlemen.
This is my friend, Mr. Sherlock Holmes.
I'm honored to meet you, sir.
How do you do, Mr. Wainwright?
Beautiful evening, isn't it? I just took a stroll down to the store to get some more birdseed. By the way, Mr. Holmes, I hope our canaries don't bother you. Little fellows are such a comfort to my wife and me.
Oh, no, not at all, sir. I find their chirruping very soothing.
Oh, I'm so glad. Good night, gentlemen.
Good night, sir.
Good night, Mr. Wilson.
Not Wilson, Mr. Holmes. Wainwright.
Oh, I beg your pardon. I'm so sorry. I thought you said Wilson.
Good night.
Not like you to mix up names, Holmes.
I didn't mix them up, old fellow. I never forget a face. Mr. Wainwright is in reality Wilson, the notorious canary trainer, whom I had the pleasure of sending to prison for a 7-year stretch in '95. Some years later, he made one of the most spectacular escapes from prison in the history of crime, and has since managed to evade all efforts to recapture him.
Great Scott, he seems a sweet old fellow.
Possibly he's reformed, but I doubt it. Our stage is set for an intriguing problem, old chap, and our cast is an interesting one. A frightened young girl, a diplomat of uncertain integrity, and a noted criminal. Watson, I have a feeling that once again the game's afoot.
Holmes, why are we strolling along the pier instead of staying at the inn? I thought you said that you were expecting trouble.
I am, old chap, and I'm sure it'll find us out.
You know, Holmes, I'm still completely mystified by the behavior of that girl, Mary Victor. I knocked at her door last evening, again this morning. I couldn't get any answer.
And the landlord told me that she was not seen at dinner last night, nor at breakfast this morning, and yet her room has not been vacated. Curious.
Hello, there's the village constable sunning himself at the end of the pier.
Good morning, Sergeant Blake.
Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson. How are you, gentlemen?
Well, splendid, thank you, Sergeant, and very appreciative of the weather that you've provided for us.
Oh, think nothing of it, sir. We always arrange that for our really distinguished visitors.
Oh.
By the way, Mr. Holmes, I was reading one of your friend's stories about you last night. The one called The Adventure of Mysteria Lodge.
That was, Wisteria Lodge, you foolish fellow.
Well, maybe it was. Anyway, I was reading it aloud to me old woman. And if you don't mind my saying so, Mr. Holmes, we both thought you made a bad mistake.
Oh, really?
Though, of course, you come out all right in the end.
Dear me, Sergeant, I stand reproved.
Excuse me, Sergeant. Holmes, look. Look at that figure standing by itself right at the end of the pier.
Mm-hmm. Our friend Wilson, the canary trainer.
He's got a revolver.
Here, we don't want any of these goings on in Kingsgate.
Come on.
Here, you. What are you doing waving that revolver about?
Keep back, the three of you.
I'm the law here. Don't you tell me what to do.
Keep back, I say. I'm not afraid to fire.
Better do as he says, Sergeant. You don't want to trifle with. Just exactly what are you up to, Wilson?
You caught up with me once again, Sherlock Holmes. But this time you're not going to send me back to a prison again. And maybe the gallows. If I can't escape you, then I'll take my own way out with this revolver.
Wilson, what in thunder are you talking about?
The murder at the inn last night. I did it.
Murder?
I'm confessing in front of the three of you. Oh, you leave my wife alone. She didn't know anything about it. Now, I hope you're satisfied, Mr. Sherlock Holmes.
He's pointing the revolver as he heads.
Wilson, you fool, stop it!
Strike me pink. He done it. Over the pier and into the sea.
Get help, Sergeant. It's possible he isn't dead.
Right, sir.
Come on, Watson.
We're going back to the inn, I suppose.
Of course we are. We've just heard a murder confession, but we don't know who has been murdered.
Holmes, what was the telegram that you sent off just now?
A message to my brother, Mycroft. The innkeeper informed me that Basil Carter, the young diplomat we met yesterday, left the inn rather hurriedly in the early hours of this morning. Come on, let's go upstairs.
Well, we'll have to break the news to Mrs. Wainwright, I suppose.
Before we do that, I think we'll see if Miss Victor's in her room. Which one is it?
Here, top of the stairs.
We'll take the liberty of looking in. Miss Victor hasn't been seen since last night. Uh-huh. Unlocked.
Lord, what a mess. Clothes strewn all over the place, open suitcases.
Yes, it
Look
looks
at
as if the young lady had been planning an immediate departure.
Where can she be? No one's seen her since last night.
Oh. Oh, I beg your pardon, gentlemen. I thought I heard Mary Victor come in. I'm Mrs. Wainwright.
Mrs. Wainwright, I'm afraid we have some rather bad news for you.
Your husband shot himself a quarter of an hour ago at the end of the pier, and his body fell into the sea.
Is he dead?
We must presume so, madam. I left the police sergeant there searching for him. Sergeant Blake should be back here any moment now.
So he did it. After all.
You don't seem very surprised, madam.
He threatened to do it.
Mrs. Wainwright, before your husband shot himself, he confessed to committing a murder in this inn last night.
A murder? Whose murder?
At the moment, we're not quite sure.
Oh, he must have been out of his mind.
Mrs. Wainwright, I'm afraid I must ask you some rather painful questions. Are you aware that your husband was a criminal, that he served a prison sentence under the name of Wilson?
Yes, I knew that. He told me when we were married 2 years ago. But he said that he'd gone straight ever since he'd come out of prison. That's why he changed his name. He was trying to make a fresh start.
You know of no reason for his planning to kill anyone at this inn?
None. And unless you find someone murdered, I wouldn't give too much thought to it.
Yes, if you'll forgive my saying so, madam, you seem remarkably unmoved by your husband's tragedy.
Why should I pretend? We were very unhappy together. This might be the best way out of it for both of us.
Oh, my soul.
My husband carried quite a large amount of life insurance. In the event of suicide, would that be payable?
It's on the policy, madam. But I must say that from your attitude, I begin to doubt whether your husband is dead.
What do you mean?
I mean that if Mr. Wilson, or if you prefer it, Mr. Wainwright, wished to disappear in spectacular style, what could be simpler than to pretend to shoot himself, drop into the sea, and...
Mr. Elm.
I'm up here, Sergeant. Ah, did you find him?
Yes, Mr. Elm. We fished him out right away. Dead as a doornail. Shot himself through the head, he did.
Well, that disposes of your last theory, Holmes.
Did you find the revolver, Sergeant?
Yes, ma'am. Got it right here with me. One bullet missing. Have you found out if anyone here's been murdered, Mr.
I
Elm?
found out very little as yet. Wait a moment. Listen.
I don't hear anything.
Exactly, you hear nothing. Yet we're within a few feet of the Wainwright's room.
What do you mean, Mr. Elm?
I mean that there is one sound we should be hearing very clearly at the moment. Right, I think of it before. The sound of your canaries chirruping. You've heard little else for days. Come on, Watson.
Where are you going?
Your room, madam. I'm afraid I must dispense with asking your permission.
You're already in my room. It seems a little late even to mention the subject.
Here's the bird cage, the windowsill. Oh, the birds are gone.
No, old chap. If you look more closely, you'll see them on the bottom of the cage.
Let me open this door and get one of them out. By Jove, Holmes. They're dead.
And yet when we entered the inn a few minutes ago, they were still chirruping.
But who on earth would want to kill a couple of birds?
That, my dear fellow, is one of the things we have to find out. So far, I must admit, I'm puzzled. We have a self-confessed murderer, and the nearest thing we can find to a corpse is a pair of dead canaries.
We'll bring you the rest of Dr. Watson's story in just a second. A second I'll take, if you don't mind, to ask you if you've ever had a glass of Petri California sherry. Because if you haven't, boy, you want to remedy that situation pronto. Try that Petri sherry before dinner some evening. Look at its clear amber color. Smell the fragrance of those luscious grapes. And get a sample of that Petri flavor. That Petri sherry can turn the usual before-dinner lull into a main event. And say, if you like your sherry dry, as I do, wait till you taste Petri Pale Dry Sherry. Is that ever good? But after all, when it's a Petri wine, it's always a good wine. And now, back to tonight's new Sherlock Holmes adventure. Strange events are taking place in the Kentish fishing village of Kingsgate. A self-confessed murderer has committed suicide, but his victim cannot be found. As we rejoin our story, the great detective and his old friend Dr. Watson are once again examining the room of Mary Victor, one of the missing guests.
You know, Holmes, the murder that Wilson confessed to before he committed suicide might have been the killing of those two canaries.
I think not, old chap. Wilson obviously loved the creatures and kept them in spite of the fact that they were dangerously apt to identify him with his criminal past. Uh-huh. Interesting. Very interesting.
Huh? What have you found?
This note lying on Miss Victor's dressing table. Yeah.
Have a look. You think you can hide from me, Mary, but you can't. Wherever I go, I shall follow you. So why not get wise to yourself and stop running away? Sounds as if the poor girl was in danger, all right.
Possibly, but the writer of that note was certainly obliging. Though the letter is unsigned, he at least gives us a clue to his identity.
Oh, what clue?
The phrase, get wise to yourself, is very un-English. It's American. Come on, old chap.
Well, where are we going now?
The envelope to this letter has the Kingsgate postmark on it. I should be surprised if that fount of all knowledge, the village postmistress, can't help us find an American visitor.
Yes, I know the young man you must be looking for, gentlemen. His name's Walter C. Bunker. He's been in here to send telegrams, and his accent's so strong you could cut it with a knife. Just like one of the Red Indian fellows you read about, you know.
Can you tell me where he lives, madam?
Better can, sir. He's been rooming at Mrs. Bell's house. 15 Laburnum Grove, down behind the gas works.
15 Laburnum Grove, Mrs. Bell. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm very much obliged to you. Mrs. Bell?
Yes, sir. What can I do for you, gentlemen?
Well, we understand that Mr. Walter Bunker has been staying with you, madam.
That he has. A nice young American gentleman.
Is he at home, may I ask?
No, sir. And I'm worried about him. This morning, when he goes out, he asks me where the nearest cemetery is.
Cemetery? Gracious me. Huh?
I tell him, and then he gives a queer kind of laugh. I'm not sure I'll see you anymore, he says. And then he walks off, and I haven't seen him since. I tell you, I'm worried about him, gentlemen.
And where is the nearest cemetery, Mrs. Bell, the one you directed him to?
About 3 miles from here.
Mm-hmm.
Just this side of Branson Wood.
Thank you, madam. Come on, Watson. The cemetery seems deserted. The music comes from the church.
Good Lord, it's a funeral.
Or a wedding. Come on.
By Jove, it is a wedding, Holmes.
I'm afraid we're on the false trail, but we'd better make sure.
Quiet, gentlemen, please. The ceremony is just ending.
Just one question. Can you tell me the names of the couple who've just been married?
Miss Mary Victor from the inn, and a young American by the name of Bunker.
Thank you. Yes, we have been following a false trail, confound it. The frightened young lady was merely frightened by her persistent American fiancé.
A threatening letter that he sent her.
Ambiguously worded, when you come to think of it. Anyway, we can cease to worry about Miss Victor. As she is now Mrs. Bunker, I think we can assume that she's out of all danger.
We've got to start all over again.
Oh, no, my dear fellow. The field is narrowing. We'll head back to the inn now, and I have a feeling that we're on the last lap of our strange adventure. Yes, here's another suspect eliminated. This telegram is from my brother Mycroft. I telegraphed him earlier on today to check on the movements of Basil Carter, the young man who left the inn so mysteriously in the early hours of this morning. His answer informs me that the gentleman in question was recalled to the Foreign Office suddenly and arrived quite safely a few hours ago.
Well, now I'm completely puzzled.
And I, old fellow, at last see daylight.
Wish I did, Mr. Adams.
Sergeant, go upstairs and get the dead man's widow and bring her to my room, please.
Right.
And then I think I can give you the solution to this problem.
What do you want with me, Mr. Holmes?
Sit down, madam. You and Sergeant Blake make yourselves comfortable. Now, in the first place, the murder occurred this morning and not last night.
I know what you're hinting at. The Canaries. I admit I killed them. But you can't do anything to me for that.
Why did you kill those birds?
I hated them as much as my husband loved them. And when I knew he was dead, their singing drove me mad. So I killed them.
But they must have been already dead when we told you of your husband's suicide.
So, Watson, but the lady was fully aware that her husband was dead when we informed her of the fact. You see, She murdered him.
You're talking rubbish.
Yes, Mr. Holmes. How could she have murdered him? We saw him shoot himself before our eyes.
Because when Wilson raised that revolver to his head, he was convinced that it contained blank cartridges. Unfortunately for him, his wife had deliberately replaced the blanks with live cartridges.
But great heavens, why? How?
Let me reconstruct the case for you. Wilson, with the connivance of his wife here, had contrived a disappearance plot. He knew that I had spotted his real identity, and so he planned this rather dramatic exit. Confessed to a non-existent murder, and then, well, had his plan materialized, he was to shoot himself with a blank. Fall from the pier, an apparent suicide.
What a fantastic scheme, but how did he plan to get away?
Well, he would have swum under the water, safe distance, and so made his escape.
Oh, his plan couldn't have worked possibly.
No, probably not, not. But at least it was ingenious. He would have destroyed his true identity and had his revenge on me by making the search for a murder that had never been committed. Unfortunately for him, his wife was his accomplice and saw in the scheme an excellent way of killing her husband.
You think you're so very clever, Mr. Holmes, but even if it were true, how could you prove it?
Observe this revolver, Mrs. Wilson. It's the one your husband shot himself with.
What can you prove from that?
Ever hear of fingerprint tests?
I've heard of them. But that revolver's been underwater.
True, quite true. But thanks to the researches of my excellent friend, Dr. John Thorndyke, an infallible test has been discovered for recording fingerprints even after immersion in seawater. I applied the test to the prints on the revolver and the bullets and compared them with some that we found on the water glass in your room. They are the same, Mrs. Wilson. Now, does a man let his wife load his suicide weapon? Sergeant Blake, I think it's obvious that the time has come for you to take over the case.
All right, so I did change the bullets. I hated him. I'm glad he's dead. What's more, I'd do it again.
Mr. Holmes.
Yes, Sergeant Blake?
Well, now that I've taken Mrs. Wilson to the station and booked her on a murder charge, I wonder if you'd mind answering a question.
With pleasure.
This fingerprint
Ah.
test. I'd like to know about that. I never heard of being able to take prints after a revolver has been handled 2 or 3 times and soaked in salt water.
Yes, Holmes, and I'd like to know when you performed the test and took the prints off the glass in her room. I thought that I was with you all the time.
You were, my dear fellow.
Well, then,
I can give you the answer in one word. Bluff.
What?
There is no such test, my dear Watson. It would be almost impossible to expect clear prints after so much handling, and totally impossible after submersion. Fortunately for us, though, Mrs. Wilson was gullible enough to believe me and give me a confession.
And there's no such person as Dr. John Thorndyke?
Oh, yes, indeed there is. He had great success last year in the case of the red thumb mark.
You didn't tell me about that case, Holmes?
No, I didn't. It was deliberate, old chap. With your taste for writing sensational stories, I was afraid you might publish the affair.
Oh? Would it have mattered if I heard?
Oh, yes, it would.
Hmm?
You would have given away, what shall I say, professional secrets. You would have provided the public, and in particular, the criminal public, with a complete education on fingerprints. And when that happens, my dear Watson, we shall have no tricks left. That will be a sad day for detectives.
Tonight's Sherlock Holmes adventure is written by Dennis Green and Anthony Boucher and is based on an incident in the Sir Arthur Conan Doyle story, The Adventure of Wisteria Lodge. Mr. Rathbone appears through the courtesy of Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer and Mr. Bruce through the courtesy of Universal Pictures, where they are now starring in the Sherlock Holmes series. The Petri Wine Company of San Francisco, California, invites you to tune in again next week, same time, same station. This is Bill Foreman saying goodnight for the Petri family. Sherlock Holmes comes to you from our Hollywood studios. This is the Mutual Broadcasting System.
.1 WBGU, Bowling Green, Ohio.
Hey music lovers, it's Kenny Rogers here from the Blues Breakfast. This summer you can join me for a walk on the wild side as I slide from the blues into rock and roll. Saturdays from noon till 2 on the Saturday Shuffle, immediately following the Blues Breakfast on WBGU 88.1 FM.
My name is Ruth Rusey. I'm a retired teacher. I'm 91 years old, and this is how I live United. I say retired, but not really. Once a week, I read books to children as part of United Way's education program. Reading to a child creates links between language and literacy. It creates a bond between grown-up and child. And believe it or not, it prepares them for a better academic future. Oh, we read about frogs and flies and pigs with wings, all sorts of juicy stuff. It's a joy to watch all those little faces. I figure I have the time and they have the need. And I've always believed that if we're not here to help each other, then what are we here for really? My name is Ruth Rusey. I help kids prepare to succeed in school. So I don't just wear the shirt, I live it.
Give, advocate, volunteer, live united. Go to liveunited.org. Brought to you by United Way and the Ad Council.
Well, wasn't that a fun adventure? That was the Notorious Canary trainer. Right up until that twist ending. It was the wife. Oh, gosh. Yes, and that was from 1945 with Basil Rathbone and Nigel Bruce and a different ad man. I didn't even remember what his name was because he wasn't the usual one of the Cy Harris, Harry Bartell. I feel like there's a Joe. There's a Joe in there. I don't know. You might hear from one of those because we have 2 more adventures coming up. So now we're going to listen to the Case of the Hungry Cat. And this first aired on October 26, 1946. So about a year later. And then the voice actors for this one are Tom Conway and Nigel Bruce. So let's get right into it. Let's see what this one's about. Our second animal theme, and it's a hungry cat here on a Sherlock Summer on WBGU FM. Enjoy.
Once again, it's time to drop in for a visit with our old friend, Dr. Watson, storyteller beyond compare and confidant of the immortal Sherlock Holmes. And here he is, waiting to greet us in his familiar study. Good evening, Dr. Watson. I must admit that on such a cold and foggy evening, your fireplace looks even more cheery than usual.
A very good evening to you, Mr. Bell. Here, come and sit down.
This chair feels good. Thank you, Dr. Watson. Nasty night out.
Yes, it certainly is. In weather like this, I find my old wound gives me an occasional twinge. Giselle bullet, you know. Souvenir of a border skirmish in Afghanistan. Long before you were born, my boy.
I've always been amazed, Dr. Watson, that with all the tight spots you and Sherlock Holmes found yourselves in, you were fortunate enough to escape with only 1 bullet wound.
Yes, Holmes used to say that I was born to be hanged. But I can remember more than one narrow escape. As a matter of fact, there's a souvenir of one of them right before you on the mantelpiece.
On the mantelpiece? Oh. Small pot of ivy, a framed photograph of you and Mr. Holmes, 2 sporting prints, and a small blue saucer. Not very exciting.
You see, Mr. Bell, but you do not observe, as my friend Sherlock Holmes used to say.
Oh.
That small blue saucer from which an ordinary house cat was accustomed to eat its evening meal was the key that saved an innocent man from the shadow of the gallows and brought a fiendishly clever murderer to justice. It all began one day when Holmes and I, finding it a bit early for lunch as we walked down the Strand, turned into the Old Bailey, wondering if the jury had yet brought in the verdict in the sensational murder case which Holmes had been following in the papers with considerable interest. As we entered the courtroom, we heard the clerk of the court saying, "Prisoner of the bar, you stand convicted of murder by the verdict of a jury of your peers. Have you anything to say before judgment is pronounced upon you?"
"Only, my lord and gentlemen of the jury, that I am innocent of this crime."
Silence in the court.
Robert Saunders, you have been found guilty of the murder of Amanda Post. The sentence of this court is that you be taken to that place from whence you came, and that 2 weeks from today, on the 12th of October, you be hanged by the neck until you are dead. May the Lord have mercy on your soul.
I must say that fellow Saunders had it coming to him, Holmes. Open and shut case if I ever heard one.
I wonder, Watson.
Oh, now really, Holmes, even you can't find anything to wonder about in the killing of that poor woman. Her husband was away, that fellow Saunders saw his chance, broke into the house, robbed Mr. Post's cash box, and evidently woke up Mrs. Post. He knew that she'd recognize him, so he made quite sure that she'd never testify by choking the poor woman to death. He then tried to burn the house down to conceal his crime. Huh. If you ask me, hanging's too good for him.
The cash box is what intrigues me, Watson.
And what, pray, is intriguing about the cash box? Why, that fellow Saunders admitted that he stole £8 out of it.
Can you tell me, Watson, why any sane man, and I heard no testimony adduced to prove that Saunders was insane, should steal the sum of £8 out of a cash box that contained 65?
Oh, let me see. Well, perhaps the fellow was suddenly frightened. Or the balance might have been in large notes that could have been traced. No way to the chops for me, they had it, Mr. Holmes.
Oh, very good, sir. Sorry, Watson, but I can't accept your alternatives. Saunders' only defense, and I grant you that it was a feeble one, was that Mr. Post had owed him £8, and that was his reason for taking only that sum.
Oh, delicious. They do a chop here better than any place in London. I suppose you believe Saunders' story.
Despite your evident amusement, I do.
Well, all I can say, Holmes, is that... Look, that girl over there in the corner, the one who's crying into her handkerchief, didn't we see her in the court just now?
Not only did we see her, but as you should know from the drawings which have been published in every newspaper these last few days, she's the fiancée of the convicted man.
I said, Holmes, where are you going?
Come along, Watson. My curiosity is aroused.
Good heavens. The last time your curiosity was aroused, I found myself in the Sahara Desert in the middle of July.
I beg your pardon, Miss Caldwell.
Oh.
I couldn't help noticing your evident distress. And although I don't wish to hold out any false hopes, let me assure you that I share your belief that your fiancé has been convicted of a crime of which he is innocent.
You really? Oh, leave me alone. You're another of those newspaper reporters.
I assure you, my dear, that I'm not. My name is Sherlock Holmes.
Sherlock Holmes? Oh, Mr. Holmes. You really believe that Bob is innocent?
Your fiancé, Miss Caldwell, is a young man of good education and very evident intelligence. I cannot bring myself to believe that he stupidly and brutally killed Mrs. Post to conceal a minor theft.
Oh, Mr. Holmes, I can't tell you what it means to me just to hear you say that. Wait, even Mr. Briggs, when he was defending Bob in that horrible courtroom, didn't speak as though he believed Bob's own story. But it's true. I know it's true. I haven't much money, Mr. Holmes, but if
It's not a question of money, Miss Caldwell. I have an ingrained prejudice against seeing the innocent convicted. Suppose you come with Dr. Watson and myself while we pay a visit to the scene of the crime. As the next-door neighbor of the house where the tragedy occurred, Mrs. Roberts, won't you tell us in your own words just what happened?
Well, Mr. Holmes, although it was some time ago, it still catches me all of a sudden when I think of it. Fair takes me aback, it does. Sometimes I come all over dizzy like...
Too much gin, if you ask me.
Quiet, Watson. I can well believe it, Mrs. Roberts.
But please, Mrs. Roberts, won't you tell Mr. Holmes what you remember?
Well, that morning, Mr. Post was going away on business to Brighton. Going to be gone a couple of days, he was. Now, around noontime, I happened to look out of my window. Not that I'm the type that's forever minding other people's business, you'll understand. And I seen him a-standing in the front door just as he was a-saying goodbye to her.
Saying? But I understood from the evidence that Mrs. Post was stone deaf.
When I say saying, I mean he was waving goodbye to her, like he always did when he went away.
Did you see Mrs. Post wave back to him?
Well, in a manner of speaking, yes. At least I seen the curtain move inside the front parlor window, so I guess she was a-waving to him from inside.
It's fairly conclusive, Holmes. The poor woman was alive when her husband left, and she was dead after the fire. No one else could possibly have killed her.
Bob didn't. I don't care what you say.
And after Mr. Post left, Mrs. Roberts, what happened then?
Nothing. I was busy with me housework, frying up a nice bit of fish for me old man's supper I was, and I didn't notice nothing next door until about 8 o'clock that evening.
8 o'clock? But the fire wasn't until midnight.
But maybe it's silly of me to mention it. It wasn't anything important.
When a murder has been committed, Mrs. Roberts, no fact is unimportant.
Well, I never did. It was only at about 8 o'clock. A cat, Minnie, came scratching and yowling around me back door. Hungry she was.
Most enlightening.
No, really, Holmes.
Was that the cat's usual habit, Mrs. Roberts?
No. Amanda Post was loony about that cat. Gave it its supper every night at 6 regular. Liver she used to feed it at 6p a pound. Now that's scandalous, if you ask me, with poor people starving.
Yes, I see. Then what did you do?
Well, I fed the cat, and then I went to bed. And the old man and I were as sound asleep as 2 blessed angels in paradise when we heard the fire engines.
No, Harrigan. The place is going under a tinderbox. If there's anyone in there, there's nothing we can do for them now.
It was horrible hearing them say that, Mr. Holmes. We were still thinking that deaf as she was, poor Mrs. Post had not been awakened by the crackle of the flames. And it wasn't until the next day, when the men from Scotland Yard were looking around the wreckage, that they told us that she'd been strangled in her bed before the fire ever started. Strangled by that smooth-spoken, murdering young devil, that Robert Sand.
No, it isn't true. That's a lie. Bob couldn't
Control yourself, please, my dear Miss Caldwell. Thank you, Mrs. Roberts. I greatly appreciate the assistance you've given us. Good day.
Oh, not at all, Mr. Holmes. It's been a pleasure, I'm sure.
But, Mr. Holmes, all that woman's evidence came out in court. There's nothing there to help you set Robert free.
Yes, I'm afraid you're right. I'm dashed if I can make head or tail out of that stream of nonsense that woman spouted at us.
Don't be too hasty, Watson. I should like to call your attention to the curious incident of Minnie's supper.
But that night, the cat didn't get her supper.
That was the curious incident.
Holmes, will you put down that violin for a moment and pay attention?
This is the 3rd time since we got home that you've interrupted what I'm sure might prove a magnificent composition, my dear Watson. What's the matter now?
Well, listen to this note. My dear Mr. Holmes, may I request your immediate presence at my home on a matter of the greatest possible importance. I enclose my check for 500 guineas as a retainer, signed Geoffrey Brookfield. In brackets, the Earl of Brookfield. 500 guinea retainer. You calmly sit here on Baker Street playing the violin.
If you like, you may write to Lord Brookfield and tell him that the paintings over which he's so worried have been sold by his son to provide jewels for the dancer with whom the young man is enamored. And send his check back to him with my compliments. Come in.
Yes, Mrs. Hudson, what is it?
A gentleman to see Mr. Holmes, sir. Mr. Post.
Mr. Post?
Oh, yes. Show him up, will you, please?
Yes, sir.
You act as though you expected this fellow Post.
When I put a ferret down a hole, Watson, I usually do so in the expectation of starting a rabbit.
You mean those questions of yours, Mrs. Roberts, this afternoon?
Our garrulous friend, Mrs. Roberts, is not the type to keep a visit from Sherlock Holmes a secret from the neighborhood.
Mr. Post, Mr. Holmes.
Good evening, Mr. Post.
Mr. Sherlock Holmes?
Quite. And this is my friend and colleague, Dr. Watson.
Good evening, sir.
Doctor.
Won't you sit down?
Thank you, Mr. Holmes. I prefer to stand. I must confess I'm somewhat upset by what my former neighbor, Mrs. Roberts, told me this evening.
Oh? What was that?
That you and Dr. Watson and that young woman were asking questions this afternoon.
There's nothing for you to be upset about, Mr. Post. But I confess that the unfortunate matter of your late wife's death had certain features which seemed to me odd, shall we say?
But this morning, Saunders was found guilty and condemned to be hanged.
I'm aware of that. But as long as you're here, Mr. Post, I'm sure you won't mind answering a question or two.
Not at all. Though I fail to see
Oh, don't you sit down, Mr. Post. You're making me nervous, walking back and forth, back and forth.
I'm awfully sorry, Doctor. Ever since this horrible thing happened, I can't seem to sit still.
Oh, sorry, I'm so sorry.
This fellow Sanders, a former employee of yours, wasn't he, Mr. Post?
He was. I sacked him. Fellow was always nosing about things that didn't concern him.
And according to him, you still owed him £8 back wages.
Oh, not a bit of truth to it.
I'm sure there wasn't. After all, a matter of £8 could mean very little to you. You'll pardon my mentioning it, Mr. Post, but you must be a man of considerable wealth now.
If you mean since my wife's death, yes, I am. When I came to England from Australia a couple of years ago, all I had was a few £100s and some business experience. I met and married my dear Amanda within the past year, Mr. Holmes, and a finer wife no man ever had. I can assure you that I'd give all the wealth she left me and a dozen times over to have her back with me.
Of course. The sentiment does you credit, sir.
Quite. And now that I've met you, Mr. Post, let me assure you that any doubts I may have had in the matter are entirely resolved.
I'm glad to hear it, Mr. Holmes. You'll pardon my intrusion, but, well, you understand.
Yes, indeed, sir, indeed.
Good night, gentlemen.
Good night, sir.
Good night, Mr. Post.
Pleasant fellow. Well, Holmes, I'm glad that your doubts have finally been set at rest.
Yes. Any lingering doubts I may have had as to Sanders' innocence have now been completely removed.
Huh? Sanders' innocence?
Watson, does it occur to you that there's something about our friend Mr. Post that doesn't quite ring true?
Oh, come, Holmes. Seemed to me a fine, upstanding fellow.
But did you happen to notice his curious way of pacing up and down?
Well, the poor man's overwrought. Probably can't keep still. It's natural enough, being a doctor.
Our sitting room, Watson, is 23 feet in length, with no obstructions in the area where Mr. Post chose to do his pacing. Yet he turned automatically again and again at each end of what I estimate to be an 8-foot walk.
8 foot? What are you driving at?
8 feet, Watson, happens to be exactly the length of a prison cell.
Now, Dr. Watson, what did Sherlock Holmes do after he called your attention to the odd behavior of Mr.
Well,
Post?
it was too late that night for us to do anything. Although Holmes did send off a cable to Australia asking for all available information on the mysterious Mr. Post. But bright and early the next morning, Holmes and I set off in a hansom cab, almost before I'd finished my breakfast. Our destination being the fire brigade station nearest the late Mrs. Post's house.
You're convinced the fire was incendiary, Captain?
Oh, no question in my mind at all, Mr. Holmes. Blazing like a Guy Fawkes piece it was by the time we got there. After we finally had her wetted down, there was a smell of paraffin oil strong enough to choke you all over the place.
So you very rightly sent for the police?
Oh, I did that, sir, just as soon as I found that poor woman lying dead in her bed, or was left of it. Though I thought she died of suffocation.
Well, the medical evidence that she'd been strangled before the fire started was clear enough. I know Dr. Richardson, a sound man, very sound.
And it was you who found the cash box, Captain?
Yes, Mr. Holmes. Being of stout metal, it hadn't come to no harm. Very hot fire like that sometimes is a freakish way of burning some things to a crisp and leaving others almost undamaged. It's a thing we often see in our business.
I wish I could have inspected the house the morning after the fire. Watson, this shows you the disadvantage of attempting to follow a cold trail.
Well, I'm sure I don't know what you expect to find.
I don't know myself, but there must be something.
Perhaps it won't do you any good, Mr. Holmes, because it's a regular ragbag collection of odds and ends. But most of the things from Mrs. Post's bedroom are right back there on that table in the corner. Those that weren't too badly burned. They would have been thrown out this morning. The police made us keep them until after the trial.
Capital. Capital.
Well, you're welcome to take a look at them, sir.
Phew. Smells more like a salvage sale. Curious-looking collection. And what is that horrible-looking object?
Some kind of a stuffed fish that was mounted on a plaque. It says, souvenir of Brighton. And over there is the poor woman's horsehair pillow. That's hot stuff to burn.
What's this?
A Bible with its covers burned off. And an alarm clock that had been on the bureau. It was still running when we picked it up, as a matter of fact.
Set for noon, I see.
And this strange-looking thing turned out to be the late Mrs. Post's corset. All that was left of it.
Rather gruesome, I must say. Makes me think of the relics we'll all have to leave behind when we shuffle off this mortal coil, eh?
Don't be morbid, Watson.
Oh, sorry.
And here's some silver that was on the dresser. And these pieces of the pitcher and basin and the soap dish. And really, that's the whole collection.
Well, not much to be learnt from that, eh, Holmes?
As I've told you on previous occasions, Watson, you see, but you do not observe.
And what, may I ask, is to be observed from this insanitary and odorous collection?
Only enough, I trust, to remove Robert Sanders from the shadow of the gallows and to substitute the estimable Mr. Post in his place.
Good gracious me.
Would you be good enough, Watson, to ring for Mrs. Hudson?
All right, Holmes, if you say so, but how you expect to frighten Post into confessing that he murdered his wife and then set the house on fire while he was 50 miles away in Brighton is beyond me.
You are in possession of the same facts that I am, Watson. And since you know my methods, you should be able to reach the same conclusions. I must admit... Come in.
Oh, you rang, Mr. Holmes?
We're expecting a visitor, Mrs. Hudson. Mr. Post, who was here last night.
Oh, I remember him, sir. A very nice gentleman. He tipped me a shilling on his way out.
I have reason to think that he'll be here very shortly. Will you show him up as soon as he arrives?
All right, sir.
You were saying?
I was about to say that the problem no longer lies in the solution of the crime. That, of course, is obvious to anyone.
Well, yes, of course, certainly obvious.
The difficulty is I haven't a shred of evidence. Therefore, the only possibility of justice being done is through forcing a confession from Mr. Post by suddenly facing him with an utterly unexpected reconstruction of what actually happened. I'd suggest, Watson, that you arm yourself with your service revolver. I have reason to think that Mr. Post may react violently.
Really? Loaded and ready. But I do think, Holmes, that if you're so sure that Post is the murderer, you might at least tell the police.
I very much doubt if Scotland Yard would admit itself completely in the wrong without proof, which, of course, I haven't got. No, Watson, Come in.
Good evening, Mr. Holmes. Dr. Watson.
Good evening.
I received your note, Mr. Holmes, asking me to call on you at once on a matter of the greatest importance.
I'm sorry to trouble you at this hour of night, Mr. Post, but there have been one or two puzzling questions in connection with your wife's death which have been bothering Dr. Watson and myself.
But I thought you said last night that all your doubts had been resolved.
They had, Mr. Post, but I didn't specify what doubts.
I'm afraid you're being a bit cryptic. I must beg you, Mr. Holmes, to come to the point.
Very well, Mr. Post. Let me present to you a reconstruction of what I can only term a highly ingenious crime.
I'm listening.
A certain man who, for the moment, shall be nameless, meets and courts a wealthy woman who, despite the handicap of her deafness, is still attractive, and marries her.
Very interesting, Mr. Holmes.
Then, ruthlessly and in cold blood, he strangles this poor, foolish, credulous woman, knowing that under her will he will inherit her fortune.
I know what you're insinuating, and
Then you admit?
I admit nothing. There's no reason why I have to stay here and listen to you insult my wife's memory.
Sit down, Mr. Post. You don't dare leave till you discover just how much I really do know.
Very well, Mr. Holmes. And just how does this man do what you say he did without getting caught?
After he's strangled her, and his other preparations have been made, he stands in the front door of their house, ostensibly waving goodbye to the wife who already lies dead upon her bed.
Holmes, Mrs. Roberts said that...
The fond farewell is answered, Watson, by a curtain that moves in one of the front windows. Who is there to know that the curtain has merely moved at the twitch of a string held in the murderer's hand?
At least, Mr. Holmes, I must congratulate you on your ingenuity.
But there were a couple of things the husband overlooked. First, Minnie, his wife's pet cat. Minnie comes to the back door at the usual hour. Her plaintive scratchings produce no result. And why? Because the wife who usually feeds Minnie already lies dead.
That's what you meant, Holmes.
Precisely, Watson. After which the house is silent until midnight, when suddenly a fire breaks forth. A fire of such intensity as to consume almost all the evidence of the crime. And, most important of all, a fire which was meant to produce in the eye of the beholder an unshakable alibi for the husband, who at that moment was so far away. The fact that Sanders chose to break in that same night was sheer good luck for the murderer, for it gave the police a ready-made suspect.
And now let me ask you one question, Mr. Holmes. Just how did the husband of whom you speak produce this conflagration while he was at least 50 miles away?
Probably by means of some simple attachment connected to the alarm clock in his wife's room, which was set to go off at 12 midnight, Watson, not 12 noon, as you surmised.
Good heavens, Holmes.
An attachment which was later destroyed by the heat of the fire.
Very pretty piece of fiction, Mr. Holmes. Of course, it would never stand up in a court of law.
I'm not so sure, Mr. Post.
Oh, I am. After all, it would just be your word against mine.
Yes. The word of Sherlock Holmes against that of an ex-convict. Two of whose previous wives died in Australia under suspicious circumstances.
I won't listen to any more.
What's been said is sufficient.
He'll never get me for those other two, nor for this one.
Then you'll do it, Nick.
Yes, yes. I killed my wife, but you'll never see me.
Nice work, Watson. Is he badly hurt?
I don't think so. Just a flesh wound in his shoulder. Knocked him out for a few minutes, that's all. He'll live, I'm afraid.
Watson, if you hadn't shot first...
Oh, it's nothing, my dear fellow, nothing at all. Don't mention it, fellow. Tell me, how did you ever deduce that whole story? just from the fact that the cat didn't get her supper.
I didn't, Watson.
Oh, you said that...
The incident of the cat's supper served to make me suspicious. I only became certain at the fire station when I saw the alarm clock.
But Holmes, I saw that alarm clock. Seemed like a perfectly ordinary clock to me.
As I remarked before, Watson, you see but you do not observe. Why would a woman who is stone deaf have set an alarm clock to waken her at 12 o'clock?
Well, of all the blind idiots...
Quite. Now, old chap, ring for Mrs. Hudson, will you? I think perhaps the police might be interested in our friend, Mr. Post.
Was Mr. Post convicted, Dr. Watson?
He was, Mr. Bell, when he was confronted with the evidence in court, plus the cablegram that Holmes had received from Australia, telling about Post's rather murky past. He went all to pieces, broke down and confessed everything. Of course, Robert Saunders was immediately set free.
I see. Tonight's new Sherlock Holmes adventure was suggested by an incident in Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's story, The Boscombe Valley Mystery. Nigel Bruce appeared by permission of California Pictures, and Tom Conway through the courtesy of Eagle Lion Pictures. This is Joseph Bell speaking hair tonic and Kreml shampoo.
This is WBGU-FM 88.1 and HD1, Bowling Green, Ohio.
Hey, Suzanne, what's up?
My sorority is having a bar crawl, and I don't know what to wear.
Why not get matching t-shirts or something? That'd be funny.
Matching shirts? How can I do that?
You know, the VARC.
The what?
Aardvark downtown. They make designs and shirts all the time for BG students. You can design your own artwork, too, if you want.
WBGU-FM is brought to you by Aardvark Screen Printing and Embroidery, located at 123 South Main Street, Bowling Green, Ohio, and always open at aardvarkspe.com.
Alrighty, it is 4:57 p.m. and we have just finished our second Sherlock Holmes adventure, The Hungry Cat, or The Case of the Hungry Cat, to be, to say the full name. And that was with Tom Conway and Nigel Bruce. That was from 1946. So we have one more full-length adventure left. But first, because I forgot to do it at the bottom of the hour, I'm going to do the weather. And we're going to do, instead of events, I'm going to do the available dogs and cats from the Wood County Humane Society. So for tonight, a low of 63 degrees. Looks like a 30% chance of showers in the night. And then tomorrow, which is Monday, July 30th, we have a high of 76, which is pretty good, and a low of 65, and thunderstorms likely in the morning and then scattered throughout the afternoon. That's great. We definitely need some rain. And then Tuesday, the 31st, looks like similar thing. High of 77, low of 62, 80% thunderstorms. All right, so let's take a look at the available doggies that are currently at the Humane Society. I've been walking them past couple days. I walked them this afternoon too, so I can give you a little more info. So we have Gracious, who's a 7-year-old girl. She's mixed breed. And it says, my age has earned me my wisdom card and expert level in snuggles. And it's true. She's very, very sweet. She's generally a pretty gentle, calm girl. She only barks at a couple dogs out of the many dogs that are there when they walk by her. She mostly just kind of sniffs, and then that's it. So she's pretty nice to other doggies. And she's very sweet. And yeah, I think she's the oldest dog that we have there. And then there's Kuchel, which is spelled Kuchel. They have to be creative with their names because they get, so many different dogs in. He's a 2-year-old male, and he has kind of the triangle ears. He's got black and tan in his coat. He's got the bristly kind of coat, and he's very energetic. He's also he's pretty nice to most other dogs. Yeah, I don't have a problem with him, and he's a good walker too. He's very cute. And then there's Rawson, who is absolutely adorable. He's some sort of, pit, Staffordshire Terrier type looking dog. And he's all black, kind of a light black kind of like gray, not quite gray, like light black/brown, if that makes sense. And he's a 2-year-old male. He's very, very cute. He likes to like put his head on you to like pet him. And he's a great walker too. He has kennel cough right now, but he's being treated for it. So that'll clear up pretty soon. And then there is Creola, and that's spelled Creola, and she's 1-year-old. She's a female, and she is also some sort of pit-ish range, some sort of range in that. I'm pretty bad with breeds. And all of them, like all the dogs that ever come into the Humane Society, our Humane Society at least, are labeled as mixed breed because it's just easier that way, I guess. And she's got tan and white, and she's got like a tan spot on one of her eyes, but then not the other. It's very cute. And she's a really nice girl. She's a good walker too. And she's pretty friendly with the other doggies as well. All right, and then we have some cats, some available cats. And this photo album was updated a little over a week ago. So for the most updated version of all the cats that are available, definitely go to the Humane Society itself, which is at 801 Van Camp Road. But I'll just kind of read off these names real quick. So we've got Stapleton and Upchurch, who are still there. They've been there since like May or something, or maybe June, I don't know, but they've been here kind of a long time. They're both orange tabby looking cats. They're brothers, so they're a bonded pair, and they're each 1-year-old. Then there's Nessie, who's a 2-year-old girl. She's an all black kitty, and she's FIV positive. And then I know there's also her son, which is Chupacabra. He's a little kitten, also FIV positive. There's Ocean, who's a 2-year-old female who's a white, like kind of medium hair cat, very pretty. Then there's Sebastian, who's a 1-year-old male, all black cat with giant eyes. There's Danger, who is a very vocal cat. He likes to meow at you. And he's a 5-year-old male cat, and he's all gray, and he has kind of a very interesting face. It's kind of like a wide face. I don't know how to describe it. He's got the look. He's got the look. And he's also FIV positive. And all that means is that you can't mix positive and negative cats together, because there's always the chance that a positive cat could pass on the disease to a negative cat and then make them positive. But it doesn't mean anything for dogs or other animals besides cats or humans or anything. And then there's also Dinah, who's a 2-year-old, mostly grayish cat. Female. There's Garrison, who's a 2-year-old male, domestic short hair. He's got kind of a lot of colors on him, tan and gray. Then there's Gnocchi, who is, I think, the oldest cat. In here, he's 13 years old. And he's a male, domestic short hair. He's got gray on the top and then like kind of a white belly. Kind of part of his face is white and green eyes. And then there's McKenna, who is, I think, the sister of Sebastian. She's also a 1-year-old, all black cat. Then there's Sesame, who's a 2-year-old female kitty. She's got a little bit longer hair, it looks like, but not a long hair cat, just a little bit longer than short. And she's black and white, kind of like the tuxedo cat, white on her chest. And then, yep, there's Chupacabra, who is 3 months old. So there you go. Those are the available animals. So feel free to check them out in person and get to know them in person. We had quite a few people come down this afternoon while I was there, only for 2 years. 2 years, yes, for 2 hours today. But there was a good flow of people. It's a great place. I really like volunteering there. All right, we're going to continue on now with our last full-length Sherlock Holmes adventure. This is called The Affair of the Politician, The Lighthouse, and the Trained Cormorant. This aired on October 19th, 1947, and the voice actors are John Stanley and Alfred Shirley. Here on the last episode of A Sherlock Summer on WBGU FM.
The makers of Clipper Craft Clothes for Men and 924 leading retail stores from coast to coast present the world's most famous detective, Sherlock Holmes. Our stories are based upon the character of Sherlock Holmes, created by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, and the dramatizations are by Edith Miser. And now for our weekly visit to the familiar firelit study of our old friend, Dr. Watson. We open the door and find the good doctor on his hands and knees rummaging through a travel-worn and battered tin dispatch box. Great Caesar's ghost, don't tell me that's the one, the famous box containing the records of Sherlock Holmes' unpublished cases.
It is indeed, Mr. Harris, it is indeed.
But I thought that was supposed to be kept deep in the vaults of the Bank of Cox and Company of Charing Cross.
Oh, not during the war, it wasn't, thank heaven. The bank was hit twice, you may remember. Yes, at the very beginning of the late unpleasantness, the government evacuated this box, along with several other notable British documents, such as certain Shakespeare folios, to a safe place in the country.
Oh, I see. And they've just been returned to you now? Why the delay, Doctor?
Would you believe it? They told me these papers were too valuable to be in private ownership. They claim they belong in the British Museum. I told them they could put these records in the British Museum when Holmes is safely buried in Westminster Abbey.
A great many years from now, let's hope.
Amen. Well, now, yes, I've been going over these files to see if I couldn't find our subject for tonight's story. Yes, I think I can do no better than relate this one. The one to which Holmes invariably referred as the affair of the politician, the Lighthouse, and the trained Cormorant. But good heavens, where are my manners? Here you are, panting to say a few well-chosen words on behalf of those very generous gentlemen, our sponsors. Go ahead, Mr. Harris, go ahead.
With pleasure, Dr. Watson. And my story today is very simple, but very important. It's a tale of the greatest values in clothes the American public has ever seen. Values that have rhyme and reason behind them, that are the result of a carefully laid-out plan. Manufacturing ingenuity and a really great distribution idea make it possible for you to buy superlatively fine Clippercraft clothes at astonishingly low prices. Yes, and right in your own local independent store where friendly attention is traditionally yours. Through the Clippercraft plan, 924 leading stores across America have concentrated their buying power, bringing you tremendous savings in manufacturing and distribution costs. Take a look at Clippercraft's expensive-looking suits at only $35 and $40, with a few deluxe models at $43.75. And Clippercraft top coats and overcoats, too, at only $30 to $40. And sport jackets at only $24. You don't have to be a Sherlock Holmes to solve your clothes problem this fall. Simply compare Clippercraft with clothes selling for many dollars more. And now to get back to the politician, the Lighthouse, and the trained Cormorant. What exactly is a cormorant, Dr. Watson?
A largish bird, Mr. Harris, that is inordinately fond of fish, which it dives into the water to catch. The word cormorant is a French derivation. Cor meaning raven, and marin meaning marine.
Oh, yes, the raven of the sea. Sounds vaguely sinister, Dr. Watson.
It was, Mr. Harris, it was indeed. This particular cormorant, whose name was Tika, was directly responsible for the death of the disreputable old baggage who, oh, there I go, getting ahead of myself again. To begin at the beginning, it was a cold, wet November night. A Saturday night, to be exact. Holmes, overcome with the restless energy which sometimes burned inside him like a seething volcano, had insisted on a visit to the Port of London, the Chinese section of it that is so often referred to in tones of awe and terror as Limehouse. We had just turned off West India Dock Road. Against the sky rose Limehouse Church, the one thing of beauty in a sordid landscape. Yellow and brown men pattered by on slippered feet. Strange voices, whispering in strange tongues, crept out of dark corners. The air was heavy with the stench of betel nuts, shandu, and fried fish. A clinging mist crept in off the river. In the channel, a foghorn wailed like a lost soul. Holmes, what's the point of all this meandering? First up one dilapidated alley, then down the next. I'm frozen to the bone. Let's get home before someone slits our throats from behind.
Nice trick if it can be done, Watson.
No, a stab in the back, or perhaps a bit of thuggy with a fine silken cord would be more in keeping with this neighborhood.
What's the good of all this prowling about?
But, Watson, we promised Mrs. Hudson we'd bring her some tea. Some suey sen in little 2-ounce packets at 7p each. A shy little tea to fill the hour of 4 to 5 with delicate scents and dreams. The slop she's been giving us lately is enough to rot the lining of one's stomach.
Well, then, let's buy the stuff and go home. That is, if you can remember where the shop is.
It's just across the crazy bridge up ahead there that leads to the Isle of Dogs. A small spice shop run by my good friend Sam Ling Lee.
Well, then, let's go there and get it over with.
Impatience, Watson, is the curse of our Western civilization. Always in a hurry. Never taking time to taste, to savor, really to observe life.
Oh, what is there worth observing in this God-forsaken district, I'd like to know?
Quick, Watson, doesn't duck into this doorway.
No, ne peux pas payer.
You dirty little thief, I'll fix you.
Good Lord, Holmes, that man was chasing her with a stiletto. After them down the next alley.
Too late, Watson.
Great Scott, Holmes. Aren't you going to do something?
What is there to do, Watson? That poor, tortured soul. She's better off dead.
Holmes, you are a cold-blooded fish. At least we could try to catch the man who stabbed her.
That is a job for the official police. We must leave something for them to do, you know. Incidents like this occur every day in Limehouse. No, the individual I'd like to bring to justice is the real murderer in this and 100 other cases.
Who's that?
The purveyor of little white packages like the one that poor frantic derelict clutched so tightly in her hand. The chief of the outfit which peddles death and decay in the form of exotic dreams.
You know who he is?
Naturally. The annoying part of the situation is that I've been completely unable to persuade any of his victims to testify against him. They're all so tragically dependent on him for his filthy wares. Oh, but enough of that. What you've just witnessed is commonplace. But here comes something I think you'll admit is rather unusual, even in Limehouse.
Yes, what do you mean?
Look there across the street, Watson. Ever see a man take a bird for a walk? It's Paru, the crippled Lascar, taking Tika for his nightly outing. They're coming down the steps of the house across the way.
They're crossing the street. That's a curious-looking bird. It waddles like a duck, but its beak is different. Its neck is almost as long as a swan's.
That, Watson, is a cormorant, a very intelligent biped. In many tropical countries, the natives train them to catch fish.
Do not fear, my beautiful Tika. The men will not harm you. Paru will protect his Tika. Careful. Here the stones are sharp.
Well, I'll be...
Undoubtedly, Watson. Paru couldn't be more attached to Tika if he were his own son.
But, did you see the bird's eyes? They shone yellow in the light of the street lamp, like a cat's.
Yes, many of the natives hereabouts are afraid of the bird. They say he has the evil eye. Perhaps that's why Paru and Tika are considered star boarders at the Lighthouse across the way.
The Lighthouse?
It's the name of the most notorious lodging house in all of Limehouse. Chinese, Lascars, and East Indians sleep there, 10 and 12 to a room on the bare floors or on mildewed mattresses. Tika and Paru sleep curled up in a closet on the top floor. At least they have privacy.
Yes, charming place. Why in heaven's name don't the authorities clean it out?
Authority around here, Watson, is Harry Hawkins, called Handsome Harry by the natives because he's so definitely the opposite. Mr. Hawkins not only owns most of the houses in this area, he's councilman for this district.
Yes, but surely it's not good business to let your property go to rack and ruin like that place across the way.
The Lighthouse, Watson, is run by a vicious old reprobate who's known as Mother Fishface, partly because she has no teeth and a cold and fishy eye, and partly because she runs a fish house in the kitchen under the steps, where she dispenses decayed fish and chips at 2p a portion to the poor starving wretches who inhabit the rooms upstairs. Mother Fishface is the only one who dares talk back to Mr. Hawkins. She's the only one who dares to be late with her rent. In fact, it's rumored that she has something on the old boy, and he's definitely afraid of her.
Knows where the body's buried, eh, Holmes?
Or how he procures the opium and hashish he undoubtedly deals in. I suspect most of her boarders are smugglers of the vile stuff.
So we came down here for the purpose of buying tea for Mrs. Hudson, and now we suddenly seem to be interested in a dope-running outfit. Holmes, you don't fool me for a moment.
5 years' association with Sherlock Holmes seems to have sharpened your powers of observation, my dear Watson.
Well,
Quiet, Watson. Quick. Slip behind this wall. Here comes Mr. Hawkins on his weekly collection rounds.
Open up there. Saturday night. Rent's due.
Here's your money, Mr. Hawkins. Blast you. Charming fellow, Mr. Hawkins.
Quiet, Watson. He's about to knock on the kitchen door opposite. Let's see what happens at the lighthouse.
Hi there, Mother. It's me, Handsome Harry, come to pay a visit.
What do you want, you old fool?
What would I want, dearie? It's Saturday night, rent night. You're a week behind now.
Supposing I am. You ain't starving. You can wait, can't you?
No, old girl, you know I wouldn't press me old sweetheart. Here, look, I brought you a present. A fine bottle of gin.
What's wrong with it? Is it poisoned?
Oh, have your little joke, won't you, dearie?
No, I don't think you do a thing like that, Harry. The day they find me murdered, that's the day you'll wish you'd never been born.
How you do run on. If anything was to happen to you, you know it'd break me heart.
Wouldn't it just? Here comes that cripple and his bleeding bird. It's always sneaking into me door and making away with a fish.
Them birds has a weakness for fish.
Well, if he don't keep out of my kitchen, it'll be the weakness that finishes him. Hey, you there, Peru.
Yes, Madam Fishface.
Keep your dirty bird out of my kitchen, and don't you call me madam.
My Tika is not as dirty as your kitchen. And as for your fish, I would not feed it to a swine, much less my beautiful Tika.
There he goes, sticking his head in the door. Here, get out, you.
Stop!
Go on.
Stop! Do not raise that broom to my Tika.
Not raise the broom, is it? Listen to me, you slimy heathen. That bird comes into my kitchen once more, and I'll wring his bleeding neck.
You listen to me, Madam Fishface, and listen well. You touch one feather of Tika's beautiful neck, and I will kill you. I will kill you dead.
Here, now, that's enough. I'll have no one threatening Mother Fishface.
You heard what he said. You heard him. There, out he goes, out of my house. Let him sleep in the streets. Let him sleep in the gutter with his dirty bird.
No, Mother, don't you get your danded up. Go on in and drink your bottle. That's a good girl. It's Saturday night, remember? You got a little spree coming to you.
I know what I'm doing. No one has to tell me.
Come, Tika. We do not enter her filthy premises again. We go sleep in the churchyard. It is warmer than Madam Fishface's heart.
Well, that little commotion seems to have resolved itself, eh, Mr. Holmes?
I wonder. At any rate, the fog's lifted a bit. We'd better get around to Sam Lee's place before he shuts up his shop. I could do with a dish of hot tea.
A dish? It'd take a gallon to warm me up.
Well, come along, then. It's no good loitering at Mother Fishface's door any longer, Mr. Hawkins. I fancy she and her bottle are locked in for the weekend.
Oh, and Braid. Oh, it's you. And what is the eminent Mr. Sherlock Holmes snooping around here for, eh?
Snooping? My dear Mr. Hawkins, you underrate me.
Dr. Watson and I were merely enjoying the local color. You have such lurid local color in this district, haven't you?
Delicious. A true Lapsang Souchang. Smoky, with a suggestion of a true tarred rope flavor.
Not bad. Could do with a spot of rum in it, though.
Typically British reaction, Watson. The Englishman is always insulting his palate and desecrating his tea with surpluses. Cream, milk, rum, even nasty little pieces of lemon. At any rate, the libation served its purpose. It's thawed you out.
I've drunk so much tea, I'm awash. My back teeth are practically floating.
But mind, you look less blue around the gills.
Oh, I wish you wouldn't use that expression, Holmes. Brings back that horrible old woman's face. I say, she did look like a fish, you know, a dead fish. Hello. Look out of the window. Here's handsome Harry running down the street.
Yes, seems to be headed in this direction. Yes, here he comes.
Oh, Mr. Holmes. Oh, thank heavens you're here. And your friend, too. I think you said he was a doctor.
Yes, I'm a medical man. What seems to be the trouble, Mr. Hawkins?
You better come right away. She'll be needing you, no mistake.
Who'll be needing whom? What's happened?
It's Mother Fishface. After I'd finished my collections, I went back to tell her about the plumbers coming in on Monday. But the door was locked, and she wouldn't answer.
Probably the result of too rapid absorption of the bottle you left behind.
Oh, you're right here. Her not answering the door wouldn't upset me most times. Only tonight there's a great smell of gas leaking out around it.
Gas? Hurry, Watson. Let's hope we're not too late.
Here we are. 2 steps down. Careful. Top one's loose.
Smell of gas. Very pronounced here, Holmes.
Quite. Door locked.
Shall I break it down?
Windows quicker. Stand back. I'll use this loose brick.
Phew, what a stench. Stale fish and gas.
Give it a chance to clear for a moment.
I say, there she is, Holmes. You can see her lying there behind the table. But what's that draped across her leg like a snake?
It's not a snake, Watson. It's Tika's neck. The bird is doubtless lying beside her, hidden by the body.
Tika!
Come on, over the sill we go.
Tika! Did someone see Tika? I look everywhere for him. I am asleep on a grave, and Tika sits on the tombstone. When I wake up, he's gone.
He's in there, Paru. I'm afraid we've come too late.
Tika! My beautiful Tika! She has destroyed him.
All right, come in, all of you.
I kill her. I slit her throat.
Paru, put away that knife. Take the bird outside. Try artificial respiration. Don't waste any time. Watson, you look out for the old woman.
My pretty, my beautiful.
Here, I better turn off this here gas jet on the stove. It's wide open.
Don't touch it. But confound it, did you have to do that?
Well, you didn't want to asphyxiate a lot of us, did you?
No, but I did want to examine that handle for fingerprints.
It's no go, Holmes. I can't bring her round. She's turning cold.
Yes, gas poisoning. That's what finished her. Unusually florid face. Gas poisoning complicated by cerebral thrombosis brought on by alcohol and high blood pressure.
Yes, I noticed the uneven dilation of her pupils.
Yes.
Poor old dear. One never knows, eh, Mr. Holmes? Who'd have thought the next time I saw her she'd be lying there like that, cold as a mackerel?
But if she wanted to commit suicide, Mr. Hawkins, why was only one gas jet open? Why not turn on the lot, eh, Holmes?
I doubt very much if it was suicide, Watson.
You don't mean it's murder? But the door was locked. No one could have got in.
That's right, Mr. Holmes. She never gave no one the key. It must have been accidental. Or at least that's what it was supposed to look like.
What brings you to that fascinating conclusion, Mr. Hawkins?
It was that bird what did it, mark my words. Time and again he knocked that gas jet open. Always old Mother Fishface would scream at him and shut it off. Only tonight, like as not, she was too drunk to notice.
Drunk from the gin you brought her?
I always brought her a bottle of gin a Saturday nights. It was that dirty Lascar did it. You heard him say he'd kill her. He knew she'd be drunk, and he shoved his bird in here. He did it, knowing he'd turn on the gas, reaching for a fish frying on the stove.
Yes, there was a fish on the stove. But it was not frying because there's no frying pan. If there had been, the gas would have been lit, and there'd have been no chance for it to escape and fill the room. Yes, there was a fish on the stove, carefully draped across this handle. You'll notice that it's still greasy and smells rather strongly of mackerel. These scratches, I imagine, were caused by the bird's beak as he snatched at the fish, thereby pushing the handle and opening the jet.
Oh, that's what I said. That dirty heathen pushed his scrawny old bird in here, knowing Mother Fishface was lying helpless drunk with no way of protecting herself.
And how did he manage to push the bird in here with all the doors and windows locked?
Oh, I see what you mean. And it couldn't have been murder. It was accidental, like. The bird flew himself in.
And how did he manage to do that?
Oh, through that little trapdoor. Up there beside the window. It's got a little swinging hinge to it. So's the fish peddler could deliver fish through it when Mother Fishface wasn't home. That blinking bird, he flew up there, he did, shoved open the trap and flew down into the room. What happened next was just like you deduced it, Mr. Holmes. It must have been. Poor old Mother Fishface, murdered accidental by a bird.
Very interesting theory, Mr. Hawkins, but unfortunately it does not jibe with the facts.
What do you mean, Holmes?
Simply this, Watson. The bird couldn't have flown in because it so happens that this particular member of the feathered tribe is an Anopterum harrisi, or Harris cormorant, which occurs only on the Galapagos Islands. It is entirely flightless.
You mean it can't fly?
Not any farther than Dr. Watson.
But it did get in here somehow, Holmes. You'll have to admit that.
Quite. The cormorant was introduced into this kitchen by the only person, other than old Mother Fishface, who had the key to that door.
Who's that?
You, Mr. Hawkins, the landlord.
Rubbish. Why should I be wanting to kill the old girl? She was my best tenant.
You killed her because you suspected she was going to split to the port authorities. You got wind of the fact they'd sent me down here to get her story.
You can't prove it. You can't prove a blasted thing. Supposing you have got my fingerprints in that gas jet. Dr. Watson here is witness to the fact that he saw me turn it off.
Is that so, Holmes?
Yeah, but you'll not find my fingerprints in the lock or in the doorknob neither.
I wondered why they were wiped clean. You were here earlier this evening. Your fingerprints should have been on the doorknob.
Well, they ain't now. You can't convict me on that.
What about the odor of fish that clings to your hands? Too bad you chose mackerel to lure Tika. Such a smelly fish. Furthermore, the notes on the papers which Watson discovered inside the woman's bodice
But Holmes,
will convict you of conducting a despicable and entirely illegal trade in opium and other... Why, Mr. Hawkins, where are you going?
Oh, I'm getting out. They won't get me. Now that the tech's gonna lay hands on me.
Holmes, why didn't you stop him?
He'll be stopped, never fear. The authorities have had the place surrounded ever since we left the tea house. Sam Lee is my go-between. Or didn't you guess?
You know dashed well I didn't. Furthermore, I don't know what you're talking about when you mention the papers I found in Mother Fishface's bodice. There weren't any papers.
I know, Watson. Bluff. Pure bluff. The important thing is Hawkins thinks we've found those papers. It's remarkable how talkative the average criminal becomes once he thinks the jig's up. The port authorities should have no trouble in finding out all they want to know. Yes, at last, the chief of this dope smuggling ring and the cause of untold human misery will be safely behind bars.
Sir Holmes, did you hear that?
Yes, it's Tika. I thought Peru might be able to bring him round. You see, he didn't have as much alcohol in his system as Mother Fishface. Let that be a lesson to you, Watson.
You go to blazes.
It's a problem for the average family these days. Practically every necessity costs more, and most family budgets are not elastic. But there's one thing a man can buy today that gives him the most for his money he's ever known. Yes, even these days. Without the sacrifice of quality, you can buy really fine Clippercraft clothes for far less than ordinary clothes cost elsewhere. And in your own local independent store, where you get friendly personal attention. It's all made possible by the Clippercraft plan, concentrating the buying power of 924 leading stores from coast to coast. Stores you can trust. Stores where Clippercraft quality is still sold at amazingly low prices. Even today, Clippercraft suits are only $35 and $40, with a few special numbers at $43.75. Even today, top coats and overcoats are only $30 to $40, and sport jackets but $24. Selling beautifully tailored, expensive clothes, inexpensive in price, at the nation's finest independent stores, is the great big idea behind the Clippercraft plan. That's why men who know insist on Clippercraft clothes. So be sure to visit the Clippercraft store in your city.
The leading stores in the metropolitan area that bring you Clippercraft clothes are Saks 34th, Broadway at 34th Street, Manhattan, Abraham and Straus, Brooklyn, the Boulevard Men's Shop, Kresge, Newark, New Jersey, and the B&B Clothes Shop, 16408 Jamaica Avenue, Jamaica. These great, courteous, and friendly stores are proud to add their names to that of Clippercraft in the label of your suit, top coat, sports jacket, and overcoat.
Watson, did they succeed in convicting the handsome Mr. Harry Hawkins?
They did indeed, Mr. Harris. They did indeed. Mr. Hawkins spilled the beans, as you say, with very little persuasion. As a matter of fact, Mother Fishface did have quite a few incriminating records tucked away carefully, which we subsequently found.
Hidden in an old teapot or the family flour barrel, no doubt.
Hidden away in a vault in the bank in Threadneedle Street, together with a very handsome collection of English banknotes.
Thrifty old gal. Who inherited the money, Doctor?
Holmes saw to it that the money went to the Limehouse mission for stranded seamen. He also arranged for Peru to spend his declining years there. He even managed to wangle a permission for him to keep Tika perched on the foot of his bed.
I guess there's nothing that can't be done if Sherlock Holmes sets his mind to it.
I agree, Mr. Harris. Of course, I wouldn't want Holmes to know about it.
When did Holmes first suspect that Hawkins had murdered old Mother Fishface, Doctor?
Oh, he was pretty sure of it, Mr. Harris, when he realized Hawkins had run for a doctor without first stopping to break a window or turn off the gas.
In other words, Hawkins was taking no chances the old girl might come to.
That's about the size of it.
And now I wonder if you'd like to give us an idea about what we can look forward to next week, Dr. Watson.
Well, now, let me see. I think that next week I'll tell you how witchcraft suddenly came to life again in the west of England, and how the investigation of a fairy ring in the grass and a weather-beaten broomstick covered with medieval recipe for flying ointment led Holmes to one of the most diabolical criminals he ever encountered. I call it the laughing lemur of Hightower Heath.
Sounds appropriate for what is practically Halloween.
Why do you think I chose it, Mr. Harris? Why do you think I chose it?
The makers of Clippercraft Clothes and 924 leading stores from coast to coast have brought you another in the new series of broadcasts featuring the world's most famous detective, Sherlock Holmes. Sherlock Holmes is produced and directed by Basil, with special music by Albert Berman. Holmes is played by John Stanley, Dr. Watson by Alfred Shirley. If you don't know your Clippercraft dealer, write Clippercraft, 200 Fifth Avenue, New York City. Your National Guard is destined to play a more important part than ever before in America's security plans. The National Guard offers young men regular Army pay and training without interference with their normal civilian life. If you are between the ages of 17 and 35, married or single, join your local unit of the National Guard. Be sure to listen next week to Sherlock Holmes in The Laughing Lemur of Hightower Heath. If you'd like to attend the Sherlock Holmes broadcasts in New York, see your local Clippercraft dealer. He'll tell you how to obtain your tickets. This is Cy Harris speaking for Clippercraft Clothes. This is the Mutual Broadcasting System.
Bowling Green, Ohio's pride and joy, 88.1 WBGU FM.
Community sponsorship for WBGU programming is brought to you by Grounds for Thought, a local coffee shop offering vintage books, vinyl, comics, and a selection of home-baked goods. Grounds for Thought, located at 174 South Main Street, Bowling Green, Ohio. All right, and that was the last full-length Sherlock Holmes adventure that you will probably hear on this station for a while. That was the, The Politician, the Lighthouse, and the Trained Cormorant, Tika, Dear Tika. And that was from 1947. All right, it's the bottom of the hour, so I know I only did the weather again like a half hour ago, but I'll read it again. So tonight, showers late, low of 63. Tomorrow, Monday, high of 76, low of 65, and rainy, thunderstorms. And then Tuesday, pretty much the same. High of 78, low 62, thunderstorms. All right. Well, what we have up next is the little clips of Old Time Radio Theater shorts that I have. And I've been playing the Word Detective ones and the Beyond the Green Door ones, both with Basil Rathbone as the voice actor. And so we have our last word detective, which is, oh yes, and I can't tell you what it's called because that's what the word is about. And if I told you what it was called, it would ruin the surprise. So I'll play that, and then I'll come back, and we'll finish off with 3 Beyond the Green Doors. Here we go.
46 years after Joan of Arc was burned at the stake, residents of a medieval castle near the northwest coast of Brittany celebrated the birth of another young woman whose destiny it would be to guide the future history of France. She was Anne, daughter of Brittany's Duke Francis II, and it was her destiny also to enrich our 20th century English vocabulary. On this edition of Word Detective, prepared for you as an educational service of this station in cooperation with the makers of Underwood typewriters, we'll be telling you exactly how. First of all, she was quite beautiful. This combined with the fact that at the age of 12, she inherited the title of Duchess of Brittany and made her one of the most proposed to young women in Europe. When the young Duchess decided to accept the proposal of King Maximilian of Germany, he was so eager he didn't even wait to meet his bride before marrying her. The ceremony was conducted by proxy, with bride and groom several hundred miles apart. This marriage, alas, did not turn out too well. Maybe it was because the bride and groom never saw each other, ever. In any case, a year after the I-do's, the marriage was annulled, and for her second matrimonial try, Anne took as her husband King Charles VIII of France. Poor Anne. This one didn't last long either. Charles wasn't a very healthy monarch and left Anne a widow after just 7 years. At this point, Anne was just 21 years old and, even in widow's weeds, still irresistible. Since the province of Brittany was equally irresistible, the proposal started all over again, and a year after her husband's death, the beautiful young lady in black said yes to Charles' successor, King Louis XII. At the age of 22, Anne of Brittany was, for the 3rd time in her life, a queen. What does all this have to do with our vocabulary? The connection is clothes. Beauty as Anne of Brittany did her royal promenading back in the 15th century, long before the days of fashion magazines and big Paris openings. In those days, styles were set in court, and the beautiful young widow of Charles VIII set one in motion that quickly spread all over the continent. Now perhaps you've guessed the way in which this beautiful Duchess of Brittany made a contribution to our everyday speech. I'll type out the exact phrase for you now on my Underwood typewriter. It was the expression widow's peak. In mourning for Charles VIII, Anne of Brittany not only made it fashionable to wear basic black, but also inaugurated a new type of widow's headgear, a hood which came to a point or peak in the middle of the wearer's forehead. Eventually the term widow's peak widened in meaning and was used to describe not only heads, but hairdos like the hoods. And so Duchess Anne of Brittany made her mark on history. Her marriages to 2 French kings firmly established the province of Brittany as a part of France. They also contributed a phrase to our everyday speech. Don't go away now. I'll be back in a moment.
And he will be back in a moment with a Beyond the Green Door. So you see what I mean. I couldn't tell you what that word detective was called because I would have had to have said Widow's Peak, and then you would know what he had typed out on his Underwood typewriter. All right, so these Beyond the Green Doors are, about 3 to 4 or 5 minute long, disturbing short stories. That's the best way I know how to describe them. So we have 3 in a row, and I'm just gonna let them play, and then I'll come back and say goodbye. Enjoy.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Basil Rathbone inviting you to join me beyond the green door. Today we shall accompany Patrolman Hawkins into Wattings Waxworks, a place which partially exists behind the green door. Sherlock had put Patrolman Hawkins on the trail of the notorious murderer Jonathan Gatt. Hawkins almost lost him on the dark, fog-bound London streets, but he turned a corner just in time to see Gatt disappear into Wattings Waxworks. Hawkins gripped his club and followed. Wattings was not as famous as Madame Tussauds, But it was more sinister. It specialized in murderers, cunningly cast in wax and set in characteristic scenes. The workmanship was superb, and Hawkins' lantern picked out the figures of Burke and Hare, the notorious grave robbers. Oh, there was Bluebeard, the wife killer, and there was beautiful Constance Kent, more dangerous than a cobra. Here was Dr. Bond, fair-haired and smiling, and over there was Orvin, the Marseille strangler. And there were many others, the world's most deadly killers, their waxen features molded with a terrible reality. But Jonathan Gatt was not to be seen. Another man might have left that place at once. Even in daylight, those figures could get on one's nerves. But Hawkins had no nerves to speak of, and he went on, past leering Landru and a solemn-faced Ogden. Lantern in one hand, club in the other, he peered around their ghastly room, knowing that Jonathan Gatt had to be here. The hairs on his neck itched, for Hawkins had the sudden feeling that the killer had somehow crept behind him and was approaching him. Now, his razor ready, Hawkins got a grip on himself. He looked into a far corner of the room and nearly dropped his lantern, for there was Jonathan Gatt. His razor was open. There was a grin on his face. Hawkins raised his club and saw that the killer's smile was the rhesus sardonicus, the death grin of a corpse. Gatt was dead, propped up against the wall as though on exhibition, staring vacantly at some imaginary victim at his feet. But who'd killed him? And who had arranged him in this bizarre pose? Could he have died of fright, unnerved by the evil wax figures around him? Or was he not dead, but merely pretending and waiting for an opportunity to use his deadly razor? Hawkins approached curiously and saw that the man was not pretending. There was no mistaking the glaze in those downward staring eyes. Somehow Gatt had met his death here, among the images of his brothers. He lacked only a victim at his feet to look exactly like the rest of them. Then Hawkins understood and tried to run, but it was too late. Terrible strangling hands had closed around his throat, and Hawkins' last thought was that the hands were very cold and smooth and waxy. You could visit Wattings Waxworks yourself any weekday between 9 and 5. It's located on Charing Cross Road and is famous for its exhibitions of murderers. Bluebeard is there, and Dr. Bond, and Constance Kent, and Burke, and Hare, and many others. Even Jonathan Gatt is there with a razor and his grin. And Patrolman Hawkins, his last victim, lies at his feet. Both look extremely lifelike. The official theory is that they killed each other. But Mr. Watting, the owner of the Waxworks, is an astute businessman. He likes to rub his smooth, cold, waxy hands together and hint at some strange mystery. On inviting you to join me beyond the green door. Tonight's story proves that a man may wander the world, cheating death at every turn, only to have it catch up with him beyond the green door. Stuart Leonard had joined the Hampton expedition in Tanganyika near the Congo border, just east of Kigali. Hampton, an anthropologist, had been hard-pressed for a guide to lead his party into the Congo, and in desperation had offered Leonard £200 in advance. In exchange for this generosity, Leonard planned to desert the expedition at the first opportunity. It presented itself in the early evening of the third day out. Under the pretext of scouting for a suitable place for a camp for the night, Leonard had pushed on ahead of the others. Coming upon a clearing, he started across it, but immediately, to his horror, discovered that he had stepped into quicksand. Slowly, inexorably, he began to be drawn downward, and the more he he struggled, the deeper he sank. Help! Help me! Quicksand! Quicksand! Hampton! Hampton! But his words died on the evening breeze. His heart beat furiously as the dark ooze drew him down to his waist. Then he could no longer move the lower half of his body, and his cries for help grew louder and more frantic. Knowing he had less than a minute to live, he struggled harder. Vainly he sought to free himself, twisting and turning, struggling with every ounce of strength that he had in him. Hampton! Hampton! Help me! Now he had been sucked down to his neck, his shoulders disappearing in the all-devouring muck, when suddenly, miraculously, the downward progress of his body ceased abruptly. I've hit a stone or a stump, he thought to himself, and an immense wave of relief passed over him. He would sink no deeper now, and if he continued calling, surely the others would hear and come to his rescue. But even as this thought crossed his mind, a strange sight met his eyes. Directly across from him, on the rim of the clearing, he discerned a brown stump, shaped like the head of a wild boar, and then, as he watched, the color dissolved into patches, and in the rising light of the African moon, he could see that it was indeed the head of a boar trapped in the quicksand. As he watched in horror, the head became a skull, and the brown patches rapidly diminished in size as hordes of driver ants, having picked the flesh from the helpless boar, were now deserting it, joining together, moving forward, pushing across the quicksand in quest of more food. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Basil Rathbone inviting you to join me beyond the green door. Children can be a problem, as Helen Mercer discovered, particularly if the child's world begins beyond the green door. When Billy Mercer was born, his mother and father were quite naturally overjoyed. Billy was a handsome little boy with his red hair and green eyes. He was an affectionate child, too, and they adored him. But by the time he was 4 years old, certain unusual characteristics in his behavior had already made their appearance. Among some idiosyncrasies, he refused to play with other children or even to associate with them. Nor was he attracted to toys or games. Instead, he preferred sitting alone hour after hour, studying the sky or a stone or the palm of his hand. He was intelligent, well-mannered, unspoiled, and blessed with enviable good health. But despite these blessings, his mother and father were somewhat concerned about him, particularly as to how he would fare at school. Unfortunately, even the family doctor could offer no explanation and recommended a wait-and-see attitude. "Maybe we brought the wrong baby home from the hospital," said Billy's father, laughing. "Stranger things than that have happened," replied Ellen. One morning, a month before Billy was to begin school, Ellen left him with her next-door neighbor and went downtown. In the midst of shopping, to her surprise, she saw Billy running down the aisle. She went after him, but he eluded her, and when she returned home and confronted her neighbor with what she had seen, the neighbor strongly denied that Billy had ever been out of the house. After that, Ellen saw Billy on 2 other occasions, when he was presumably home in bed with his father babysitting. One afternoon, she was home alone, taking a nap, when she was awakened by the sound of voices somewhere in the house. Children's voices. She discovered that they were coming from the cellar. At the top of the cellar stairs, she flicked the light switch, but the bulb was burned out. "Billy," she called, "are you down there?" "Yes, Mother," answered Billy. "Is someone down there with you?" This time there was no answer, and impatiently Ellen started down the stairs. "Billy, where are you? I can't see." "Over here, Mother." Her groping fingers found the light cord, and she pulled it. To her amazement, she discovered 100 or more little boys, all of them identical to Billy. They surrounded her. "Billy!" "Yes, Mother?" Came back the reply in chorus, and the boys pushed forward, their beautiful green eyes blazing with indescribable hatred, their hands reaching out.
All right, so you see what I mean. Those are weird. I'm glad I thought about those, because usually I would just do the Sherlock Holmes full-length adventures and then some, random songs at the end. But I forgot that I had those, but I'm glad I've been playing them. They're called Beyond the Green Door, in case you want to, listen to all of them. They're, as you can see, pretty short, 3 or 4 minutes or 5 minutes. All right, well, that about does it for me for tonight, and that about does it for the Sherlock Summer radio show. But tomorrow night, Monday night from 8 to 10 p.m. is my last MICK'S show. So that's the show where I play music for 2 hours, usually unified by one theme. And I'll give you a hint. I've already created the playlist for tomorrow night, and there are 7 or 8 songs that have something to do with goodbyes, but then I'm going to play some songs that I have written or just recorded, covers and originals that I've recorded over the years. And so, it'll be pretty fun. It'll be a fun show. So that's, tomorrow 8 to 10 p.m. And if sometime during the rest of that week before I move out, I have, spare hour, 2 hours, no one else is on air, I may come in and do a little pop-up show. But for now, for this evening, I'd like to say thank you for listening to A Sherlock Summer. I'm your host, DJ Mick, and I hope you have a great rest of your evening. David Sears is up next. Bye-bye. Broadcasted on the campus of Bowling Green State University from the Michael and Sarah Coolene Center, you're listening to WBGU-FM on 88.1 and HD1, Bowling Green, Ohio.